Hello, everyone. My name is Sydney Geiger, and I'm a policy analyst at the Council of State Governments. I'm very excited to welcome you to the Council of State Governments virtual 2020 National Conference. Just to give you a little bit of background on CSG, CSG is proud to be the nation's only nonpartisan, not-for-profit organization serving all three branches of state government. And although we cannot convene in person this year, CSG looks forward to continuing to share innovative and successful state practices through an online platform. Today, we have the opportunity to showcase how the benefits of public sector apprenticeships and how states can lead the way in implementing apprenticeship-related workforce development initiatives. Faced with an aging workforce and numerous fiscal challenges, both local and state governments have struggled to attract young workers to public service in recent years. Public sector apprenticeships may be a potential solution to this issue. Additionally, as we all know, states are facing a new type of obstacle during this COVID-19 pandemic. So public sector apprenticeships can play a significant role in helping state governments recover from the economic impacts of COVID-19 while helping individuals obtain skills and work experience that they need to thrive. Although the private sector currently provides over 23,000 apprenticeships in 31 states, recent initiatives to expand apprenticeships at the state level have generally ignored the possibility of expanding these apprenticeships into the public sector. So as such, we will discuss the various benefits of expanding apprenticeships into the public sector, both for the workers and for the state and local governments today. So before we get started, we'll go over some quick housekeeping items. If we can go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I would like to draw your attention to a couple of things. First of all, closed captioning is available. You can use the link on this screen or in the chat. And also to reduce noise during the conversation, we ask that all participants be muted during the webinar, and please turn off your camera at this time if it is on. We will have time later in the webinar for us to unmute and really have that conversation, but while our presenters are speaking, I prefer that everyone stay muted. Additionally, the webinar will be available on our website within a week. And so you will be able to access it then. There's also, the slides are accessible in a PDF format on the CSG National Conference website as well. And if you have any questions for panelists or any general questions about technology problems, please submit them through the chat feature and we will definitely get back with you. Again, if you have any technical difficulties, you can send those in the chat as well. And so we ask that you keep the chat discussions on topic. We'll be monitoring that chat to discuss for discussion and panelist questions. So we appreciate your cooperation and keeping the dialogue free from any solicitations or disruptive commentary. But without further delay, let's go ahead and get started. We have a full agenda today. Next slide, please. I'm excited to introduce you to our presenters and our speakers today. We have 5 amazing speakers who we're so honored to have here with us. First off, I would like to introduce Dr. Diana Elliott, who is a Principal Research Associate at the Center on Labor, Human Services, and Population at the Urban Institute. She focuses primarily on families' financial security and economic mobility and the programs and policies that support them. Her proposed policies focus on housing affordability, financial empowerment, and apprenticeships. Previously, Dr. Elliott served as a research manager for Pew Charitable Trust work on financial security and economic mobility. In this position, she helped field a major national survey on American family finances, and she's also published numerous reports and briefs on financial well-being. She also previously served as a family demographer for Fertility and Family Statistics branch in the Social, Economic, and Housing Statistics Division at the U.S. Census Bureau. So we're very honored to have Dr. Elliott with us here today, as well as her colleague, John Murata, who is a policy associate in the Center on Labor, Human Services, and Population at Urban Institute, with 7 years of experience in nonprofit and governmental organizations and expertise in workforce and economic development policies and programs. He studies economic opportunity and skills, particularly how job training and work-based learning programs can lead to family-sustaining wages and viable career paths. He was previously the Senior Program Manager at the Center for Regional Economic Competitiveness, where he managed research projects and facilitated the development of talent strategic action plans for regional economic development organizations. While serving as assistant to senior leadership at the DC Department of Employment Services, Mr. Murata conducted labor market research and led performance management and interagency strategic planning efforts. Very impressive. And another speaker that I'm so honored to introduce is my colleague, Dina Klimkina. Dina is the program manager of our disability employment policy portfolio here at the Council of State Governments. She manages CSG's programming with the State Exchange on Employment and Disability, the Cape Youth Center, Center for Advancing Policy on Employment for Youth, and Kentucky's Retaining Employment and Talent After Injury or Illness Network, or RETAIN. Prior to CSG, Dina worked at the University of Kentucky, One Earth Future Foundation, Center on Rights Development, United Nations, amongst other organizations. So very honored for our first three presenters. If we go on to the next slide, I'm honored to introduce you to our other two speakers who come directly from programs that promote these public sector apprenticeships. So we're very, very honored to have them here with us today. First off, I'm honored to introduce you to Director Kevin Miller, who has served as the Executive Director of the Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities since January of 2011. In this role, he provides employment support and services for workers with disability. Under his leadership, the Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities has achieved compliance with the U.S. Department of Education's audit findings, implemented a standardized fee for services, increased membership of businesses committed to hiring individuals with disabilities, and served a waiting list that began with over 17,000 individuals. He has served for over 25 years in the Ohio state government, and he is a member of the National Autism Society, Autism Speaks, the Association of Ohio Commodores, and is a past president of the Mark Young-Peter Memorial Scholarship Fund. So we're very honored to have Director Miller with us today. And last but definitely not least, we're very honored to have Director Wynn, the director of the Boston Mayor's Office of Workforce Development, a department within the Economic Development Cabinet in Boston. Prior to her role there, she served as the Chief of Staff at the Boston Housing Authority. She has over 25 years of experience in operations, programs, resource, and budget management. She's worked for the Urban League of Massachusetts, the Boston Women's Fund, the Mayor's Office, University of Massachusetts, Boston, and she's currently chair of the Neighborhood Jobs Trust. President of the U.S. Conference of Mayors Workforce Development Council Board of Trustees, and a board member for the Boston Educational Development Fund. As director of the Office of Workforce Development, she's helped launch initiatives such as Tuition-Free Community College, the Greater Boston American Apprenticeship Initiatives, which she'll be talking about later, City Academy, and Boston Saves, the City Children's Savings Account Program. So as you can tell, all of our speakers have very, very impressive resumes and backgrounds, and we're so honored to have them all with us today. But I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to our colleagues and friends at the Urban Institute for them to share a little bit of background on public sector apprenticeships. So if we can go on to the next slide, and I will pass it over to Diana and John.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Sydney, for such a lovely introduction. So delighted that you could all join us today. My name again is Diana Elliott, and I'm a senior researcher at the Urban Institute, and I lead key initiatives on our apprenticeship portfolio. And today I'm joined by my colleague, John Murata, as Sydney introduced, and we'll be introducing and presenting the basics about apprenticeship and research and information about the advantages of public sector apprenticeship. But before we jump into that content, if we can jump to the next slide. Just a few words about Urban Institute, who we are and what we do. Urban Institute is a nonprofit research organization. We're based in Washington, D.C., and we use research and evidence to elevate policy conversations and decision making. We have more than 500 experts who immerse themselves in topics and communities and assess the effectiveness of social and economic policies and programs. So in the case of our apprenticeship team at Urban, we not only evaluate programs and their effectiveness, but we're now part of helping to implement and start programs up through our technical assistance provision. So it's been really exciting to both evaluate and start doing some of this actual work to raise these exciting initiatives up. Next slide. So for those of you who are relatively new to registered apprenticeships, I just want to highlight 5 key components to what a registered apprenticeship program is. So the first component here is paid employment. So apprentices are typically treated as employees of an organization. They are not considered temp. They are not typically considered interim. They're considered employees. Secondly, related technical instruction is really important here. And what does that mean? That means training that typically happens in a classroom or online to supplement what's happening at the workplace, what they're learning at the workplace. And that brings us to on-the-job learning, which is the third component. On-the-job learning with mentoring is typically training that happens on the job with guidance. You know, I like to say that most of us learn our jobs from someone else on the job with guidance. So this is not atypical from how most of us learn how to do our work. And then rewards for skill gains is the fourth component. What exactly does that mean? Mostly that's incremental pay raises. And it's usually tied to milestones in training. So perhaps someone has been there 6 months. They might get a little bump in their pay to reflect that increased knowledge and know-how and productivity on the job. And then finally, national credentialing. And what does that mean? So typically, with a registered apprenticeship program, there's a U.S. Department of Labor certificate that an apprentice receives upon completion, but often an employer or the training that they provide to an apprentice will also be associated with that credential. For example, some of the IT credentials could be linked with this, or in some cases, an apprentice will also be earning a degree, whether that's an associate degree or in some cases a bachelor's degree at the same time as part of this program. Next slide. So in our work, we've found that there are sometimes misconceptions and confusion about what an apprenticeship is or is not. So we often start our conversations and presentations with a little bit of myth busting. So the first misconception that we encounter a whole lot is that apprenticeships and internships are the same thing. They're in fact not the same thing. Apprenticeships are long-term, they're paid, and they generally lead to a job. Many internships, in contrast, out there are really short-term opportunities, and often they're unpaid. And again, if we go back to that, if we think about what I said in that past slide, that prior slide, apprentices are often treated as if they are full-time employees. So it's a very important distinction there. Misconception number 2 is that apprenticeships are for the trades only. The trades really do have the highest shares of apprenticeships. So electricians and, you know, for example, other trade occupations have really, for decades, have really been the biggest promoters and adopters of the registered apprenticeship system. But in recent years, there's been a real push for apprenticeships outside of those sectors to really expand our understanding and definition and the uptake of apprenticeship in other sectors. So for example, IT is seeing growth right now We've seen lots of growth in advanced manufacturing as well as healthcare. So these are sectors where we're really starting to see this pick up. Misconception number 3 is that apprenticeships are only for young people. Not at all the case. Apprenticeships are open to people of all ages, and they may be used to train those changing fields or incumbent workers. And in fact, the median and average age of apprentices these days is in the late 20s. So people are definitely taking on apprenticeships, not necessarily straight out of high school, but after they've been in the workforce for a little bit. And then finally, misconception number 4, and we hear this a lot when we engage with and talk to employers. There's this real belief that apprenticeships cost too much money and they're too much effort. There is actually, this is a strong misconception, because there's actually really good research out there that employers see a return on investment of about $1.50 per apprentice by the second year of employment. That's huge. Apprentices begin contributing to productive work at the workplace very soon after they are hired. And it really, these assessment practices and how employees are onboarded are very similar to what already exists at most workplaces. So there's not a whole lot of systemic changes that have to be created at the workplace. And I'll just highlight this additionally with another example of how this can save an employer money. One company that we know of recently hired an apprentice into a full-time permanent software engineer role. This company told us that it typically costs them tens of thousands of dollars to recruit someone for this role. So by hiring a youth apprentice, they saved tens of thousands of dollars right at the start. So I think that's a really strong example of how this cost savings can work, not just in terms of the productivity savings in terms of productivity, but in savings just in hiring alone. Next slide. And our research in the US and internationally shows that apprenticeships are really a boon for employers who hire apprentices. And this includes public sector employers. Apprenticeships offer employers access to new and diverse pools of talent, the ability to grow their workforce and grow it from within, reduce turnover, high levels of worker productivity, and again, to that point that I brought up in the last slide, cost savings. Next slide. So let's talk about why apprenticeships make sense for the public sector. Next slide. So the public sector has been struggling for some time to attract and retain the next generation of talent into its roles. The economic downturn may be hitting state and local governments hard right now. We all know that. But as we move towards normalcy, the same underlying hiring issues are present and persistent. And this really suggests that innovations in finding talent and building the public sector workforce are needed. And we know that some state and local governments are using apprenticeship as that new and innovative strategy to find and build that workforce. In a 2018 survey of state and local human resources professionals, 20% of respondents said that internships and apprenticeships are successful recruitment practices for reaching qualified candidates. So this is something that people are starting to use, and they're seeing great results with this. Next slide. And there are several reasons and opportunities why public sector apprenticeships could and should be expanded. First, the number of quality apprenticeship opportunities could increase substantially. And this would really help to create a culture change broadly for building talent and creating a pipeline of workers. Second, apprenticeships could also be a bridge between a local government's workforce development efforts and its own needs for talent. This could connect un- and underemployed workers in the area with opportunities to build their skills and would enable local governments to source talent. Third, apprenticeships could increase the diversity of public sector workers with more emphasis on learning by doing, which is what apprenticeship is really good at. Instead of academic learning exclusively, we could really expand those opportunities. There's a growing body of research that suggests that credential-based hiring, or hiring people based on the degrees that they hold, is not necessarily beneficial. By hiring apprentices for their potential, the public sector can grow better talent from within. Fourth, by hiring apprentices, government officials will have better firsthand knowledge of how apprenticeships work. This will only enhance policymaking and workforce development for both the public and the private sector. And finally, public sector occupations often have private sector counterparts, such that apprenticeships in the public sector could serve as a training ground for individuals to transition into the private sector. So now at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, John Murata, and he'll discuss a case study that he authored on the Kentucky Civil Service Apprenticeship Program and the lessons learned there that can inform those of you on the line today.
Thanks, Diana. And thanks to everyone for joining us today. So in 2018, Kentucky launched several pilot public sector apprenticeship programs, including an innovative program to increase opportunities for individuals pursuing social services careers in state government. And Secretary of Education and Workforce Development at the time, Derek Ramsey, conceived of this pilot for two primary reasons. As was previously mentioned, he shared this recognition that the Commonwealth and its local governments were struggling to attract and retain the next generation of public servants. And Secretary Ramsey realized that new strategies were necessary to attract, train, and retain a high quality state workforce. Secretary Ramsey also was and remains a fervent proponent of apprenticeship, and he wanted the government to walk the talk. He believed that the ability of government officials to convincingly promote private sector apprenticeships would be boosted by showing that they are using this talent development strategy too. In that case, the government isn't just telling businesses they should try apprenticeships; they're showing them how it can actually work. Can move to the next slide. So what did we set out to do with this case study? Primarily, we wanted to understand how these public sector apprenticeship programs were conceived, developed, and implemented. Our team conducted interviews in December 2018 and January 2019 with 22 people, including 5 apprentices and public officials representing 6 different government agencies and offices. We examined 4 of these pilot apprenticeship programs. One was for a direct support specialist program administered by the Department of Community-Based Services. The second was a help desk technician program administered by the Commonwealth Office of Technology. The third was an automotive technician specialist program administered by the Transportation Cabinet. And finally, an office administrative services program administered by the Barron County Judge Executive's Office. And so we focused on several main questions. The 3 that I'll talk about in the next few slides are what do these public sector apprenticeships aim to achieve? What are the benefits for employing agencies, and what are the benefits for public sector apprentices? There was several other more topics that kind of went in the weeds in the report about dealing with how the programs were designed and went through the registration process, and also how they recruited apprentices. So what did these apprenticeship programs aim to achieve? Well, representatives from the Department of Human Resources Administration in Kentucky shared with us that they were really looking at the ultimate kind of bottom line and how many apprentices would ultimately become full-time permanent state government employees. They really wanted to see this be a viable pipeline to permanent state government employment. In the Office of Technology, they also wanted to develop a pipeline of young talent to fill critical positions within the agency, and to be in a better position to rely less on temporary and contract staff to complete projects. But they also recognize that not all apprentices would become permanent state government employees, and they saw this program as a way to as a kind of source of reliable talent for more rural areas in Kentucky that have a shortage of IT workers. With the transportation cabinet, they also wanted to cultivate a next generation workforce to fill automotive technician jobs across the state's 12 transportation districts. And one sort of illustrative quote came from an equipment garage supervisor who told us, quote, "In 3 to 5 years, 70% of people in this garage might be retired, and the apprenticeship program will be a good way to get good qualified workers, good qualified candidates whose skills are up to date." And finally, a representative from the Barron County government wanted to spark more interest in local government operations among young residents, to build a greater awareness of what local government does and to get more engagement from its young residents. Next slide, please. So then what were the benefits for these agencies? At the time that we conducted our interviews, these programs were active for less than a year, but even so, agencies reported many benefits in terms of productivity and contributions to their operations. So this kind of builds on the point Diana made about how apprentices are making productive contributions pretty early on, and we heard that through these interviews. So in the auto mechanic program, we learned that apprentices were, completing work that would have otherwise been delayed for days or even weeks without their efforts, and that this was especially helpful during busy seasons of snow and ice treatment and also grass mowing. And we also heard from the sort of less intuitive finding from the transportation folks that the apprentices are there explicitly to learn, and oftentimes they really want to prove themselves to their supervisors and colleagues. And this kind of manifested in these equipment garages, in the apprentices seeking out different ways to contribute to the garage operations, such as looking independently, kind of finding equipment in need of cleaning or repair, and performing maintenance that had been delayed on tools that they use for repair in the shops. And also there was several examples of the apprentices transferring knowledge about advances in certain diagnostic softwares and technologies that they had learned about in the classroom that weren't yet widely used by some of their more experienced peers in the equipment garages. And then at the Commonwealth Office of Technology, the employing team shared with us that when they brought on their apprentices, they were in the middle of a sort of massive government-wide effort to upgrade operating systems for staff computers, and that the apprentices were pretty quickly able to support the more experienced help desk technicians and contribute to this large project. Next slide, please. And then the benefits to the apprentices. We heard a lot from the apprentices that we spoke with from each of the programs. One of the direct support specialist apprentices shared with us that without this apprenticeship opportunity, she would likely have been earning low wages in a retail or service sector job while trying to put herself through college courses. But with this program, she was able to, earn an income while working meaningfully toward her ultimate career goal of being a social worker. And one of the automotive technician specialists apprentices told us that this program helped him progress toward the 2 years work experience required for the automotive service excellence certification exam. And he noted that many of his community college peers were not getting this requisite work experience while they were in school. So he was basically kind of getting a leg up on them post their classroom training, or technical training rather. At the Office of Technology, one of the help desk apprentices shared with us that he was finding, prior to the apprenticeship, was finding it very difficult to break into the tech field without prior work experience. And he was very aware that this apprenticeship would give him that entry-level experience that could allow him to get other positions in the field should he not be able to stay on with the state government. And then an apprentice that we spoke to in the local government office, she shared with us that the apprenticeship had been a valuable experience for sharpening her networking skills and cultivating professional relationships that she thought would be useful to her for years to come. And from apprentices and managers alike, we repeatedly heard that if a permanent civil service position wasn't available at the end of these programs, that these apprentices would be attractive candidates to local private sector employers in their respective fields. So I'll stop there. If you're interested in learning more details about Kentucky's pilot program, you can check out our report, which may have already been shared in the chat. If not, we can do that. It's called Leading by Example, Public Sector Apprenticeships in Kentucky. And I'll hand it back to Diana now to talk a little bit about what's next for public sector apprenticeship.
Great, thank you, John. So overall, this research really shows that public sector apprenticeships are a viable way to expand economic opportunity and address talent needs. So what are some of the next steps that we think could happen here? Well, first off, expanding these opportunities in more locations and across more occupations is a good idea. So that's sort of a first step. Secondly, documenting the benefits and costs to governments and cost savings to governments can help with this case making. And again, some of these really great examples that John elevated just anecdotally help with that as well. So sharing this and then sharing how this is most useful as a strategy is really helpful. And then third, helping to build the capacity of public officials to understand and promote apprenticeships is helpful, particularly in these conversations with the private sector. As John illustrated, even if these apprentices don't stay on in the public sector, this allows them to easily find private sector jobs. And in the case of IT, for example, in many cases, there aren't really entry-level IT positions. So giving an apprentice this opportunity in government helps launch them into really rewarding private sector roles should they choose that. There's often reluctance in the private sector to try some of these things. So having the public sector be a real champion and advocate for this model is tremendously helpful for their uptake and use. Next slide. So we really see public sector apprenticeships as being beneficial across multiple parties. First, it helps provide training and employment opportunities to un- and underemployed residents, which is, I think right now in COVID, that's a huge first order priority for many people. Second, it can help to address some of the challenges that state and local governments are experiencing relating to talent shortages. So it can really help, you with your own workforce development. And then finally, this can provide a much needed bridge to the public sector, or between the public sector and the private sector, to start these really rich workforce development conversations. This can really help meet the talent needs of the private sector and can really possibly even serve as an engine for economic development, not just for the private sector that you have there right now, but as a really important pilot to demonstrate to potential businesses looking to relocate that you have this capacity to build talent right there in your own community. So at this point, this is the end of our slides. Go to the next slide. We have our contact information here. So if you have any questions whatsoever, please do contact us. You can contact me, you can contact John, and we have a really great team of apprenticeship experts who can help you think about what this means in practice in your own area. So now I'm going to turn it back over to our colleagues at CSG.
Thank you so much, Diana and John. That was such a great background and demonstration of the benefits that it can bring to the state and to the apprentices themselves. So really appreciate that. And now I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Dina Klimkina, who will discuss how states can work to ensure that while they're implementing these public sector apprenticeships, that they are inclusive of all citizens. So Dina, I'm passing it over to you.
Thanks so much, Sydney, and thank you to our fantastic partners at the Urban Institute. That was such a fantastic presentation. It'll be hard to follow. But today, my short presentation will provide some other critical considerations as you will pursue expansion of apprenticeship programs in your state. So namely, how to make sure apprenticeships are inclusive to all, including individuals with disabilities. I will also briefly discuss the future of apprenticeships as identified by CSG and the State Exchange on Employment and Disability Future of the Workforce Task Force last year. This presentation stems from the work of CSG's Disability Employment Policy Team and the SEED team. And the SEED team, or the State Exchange on Employment and Disability, is a unique state federal initiative that promotes the adoption of disability inclusive state policy through an innovative partnership model. This formal collaboration, launched by the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy, helps states and local governments develop and implement meaningful policies and practices that lead to increased employment for people with disabilities and a stronger, more inclusive workforce and economy. So to get started, from 2018, we saw that the employment to population ratio for individuals with disabilities was about 37.5%, in contrast to the employment to population for individuals without disabilities, which was about 77.8%, nearly double that of individuals with disabilities. So given the staggering employment gaps, as well as the unique talents, skills, and perspectives individuals with disabilities bring to the workforce, there's ample opportunities to tap into this talent pool. The benefits of including more individuals with disabilities in the workforce are numerous, including higher workforce morale, a more inclusive workplace culture, improved operational performance, productivity, creativity, and profitability. You'll also see a reduction in turnover, not to mention the more financial stability and other benefits to individuals with disabilities. That said, how can states ensure that individuals with disabilities are getting excellent workforce training by promoting participation in a variety of work-based learning programs, among them registered apprenticeships? So the United States Department of Labor protects applicant and current participants in registered apprenticeship programs from discrimination on the basis of disability as well as other diversity factors. And these federal funding opportunities are there to help states expand apprenticeship programs. There's also a number of funding opportunities. Inclusive apprenticeships, that is, apprenticeships that also provide skills training to people with disabilities, can help states increase the hiring and retention, expand their workforce systems, attract new and diverse talent, and grow into industries like healthcare, information, technology, transportation, and energy. That said, diversity and inclusion, more broadly, is a cornerstone of a successful apprenticeship program and should be considered at various stages in the apprenticeship process. At the state level, this includes developing inclusive apprenticeships to ensure that apprenticeship programs consider the unique strengths and needs of individuals with disabilities from the start, preparing apprenticeships to ensure that people with disabilities have the proper skills and training to enter apprenticeship programs, developing positive inclusive hiring practices to ensure that people with disabilities are targeted for and connected directly with opportunities, and supporting apprenticeships to ensure that the apprenticeships are available to individuals with disabilities and individuals have access to resources, supports, and protections that they need to be successful. So when developing apprenticeship programs may want to consider adopting strategic plans to encourage diversity and inclusion. They can do this by creating a discrimination-free environment through anti-discrimination workplace policies and disability etiquette training. Quick plug, CSG will be hosting a disability etiquette training on December 11th as part of our national conference, and I encourage everyone here to sign up. States can also adopt measurable goals for individuals with disabilities in apprenticeships. As the saying goes, what gets measured gets done. Addressing barriers to equal opportunity by reviewing personnel processes. Adopting specific and practical steps to addressing barriers, such as targeted outreach and recruitment. Implementing monitoring and reporting standards and practices to ensure continuous improvement. Further, states may want to consider ensuring a disability perspective in councils or committees addressing apprenticeships at the state level. So in order to develop accessible and inclusive apprenticeships from the start, some states are incorporating voices and entities from the disability community, including vocational rehabilitation agencies, into apprenticeship planning discussions, as well as a variety of other apprenticeship opportunities. So 2 quick examples, and I'm happy to provide resources to examples. I did not include them in the slide. I didn't want to be too cumbersome. But first we have California Assembly Bill 1019, which amended sections of the California Labor Code to add the Director of Rehabilitation and the Executive Director of the State Council on Developmental Disabilities to California's Interagency Advisory Committee on Apprenticeships, and to create a subcommittee focused on apprenticeships for the community with disabilities. So according to the bill, these efforts are collectively intended to encourage greater participation for individuals with disabilities in apprenticeships and pre-apprenticeship programs. In 2019, Governor Michael Parson of Missouri issued Executive Order 1920, which creates the Office of Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning. The primary objective of the office is to increase significantly the number of individuals with disabilities in apprenticeships, including federally registered, certified, non-registered apprenticeships, earn and learn, and pre-apprenticeship programs, as well as other work-based learning experiences. Secondly, states are also utilizing pre-apprenticeship programs to prepare individuals with disabilities for entry into registered apprenticeship programs. So pre-apprenticeships are a little bit different because they're designed to prepare individuals to enter and succeed in a registered apprenticeship program. So they help individuals meet the entry requirements for apprenticeship programs and ensure that they are prepared to be successful in that apprenticeship. So pre-apprenticeship programs can include training and curricula that align the skills and needs of employers in the state, access to educational and career counseling and other supportive services, hands-on meaningful learning activities, opportunities to attain at least one industry recognized credential, a partnership with one or more apprenticeship program that places individuals who complete the pre-apprenticeship into an apprenticeship program. So what does that all mean? So for example, in 2016, Pennsylvania enacted the Work Experience for High School Students with Disabilities Act to facilitate job and career development between local education agencies and public and private employers to ensure that high school students with disabilities can transition into competitive integrated employment. The law also authorizes arrangement for work-based learning experiences. As I mentioned previously, we have numerous other examples that we are happy to share with you, but I didn't want to overwhelm the presentation. Next, states also have taken various approaches to directly support the recruitment and hiring of individuals with disabilities for apprenticeship programs. So states in this way can act as model employers for individuals with disabilities by developing apprenticeship programs at the state level, like we heard from John in the state of Kentucky. So states can also connect with people with disabilities by directly moving them to apprenticeship opportunities and supporting them through the apprenticeship process, as well as the application process. This can also include providing tax incentives to businesses that hire apprentices with disabilities. So for example, Ohio's Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities, which we'll hear a little bit more about, collaborates with the Ohio state agencies to identify their workforce need and develop apprenticeship opportunities that align with the goals of students and adults with disabilities. The program assists participants through application, interviewing, and onboarding, but I will leave that to our later speaker to discuss. States might also want to consider partnering with trade, industry, and employer groups and associations, as well as companies, educational institutions, nonprofit organizations, as well as other entities to create new industry-driven apprenticeship solutions, which can also address the needs of a diverse population. So this also allows states to develop programs which can be beneficial for local industry needs and specifically target their community. And finally, how states can support apprenticeships. So states have developed a range of resources and protections to support people with disabilities throughout their apprenticeships. This includes facilitating peer-to-peer mentoring to help apprenticeships with disabilities navigate the challenges they face in the workplace and prohibiting discrimination against apprentices on the basis of their disability. So, for example, though this bill did not pass ultimately, Michigan House Bill 4579 proposed the establishment of a peer-to-peer apprenticeship monitoring program for individuals with disabilities, along with other underrepresented groups. So the bill would have provided mentoring and support services to establish a network of peers. So that is a very, very broad overview. And now I'd like to kind of shift gears and look ahead at the future of the workforce and how apprenticeships might change as we move forward. Next slide, please. So last year, the Council of State Governments and the State Exchange on Employment and Disability team convened the Future of the Workforce Task Force to explore what the future of work will look like for individuals with disabilities and offer policy options and best practices for states. The task force focused on the issues of apprenticeships, automation and technology, as well as the gig economy. And the report is available on the SEED website, and I believe we're putting a link in the chat. And through the course of the discussions, the task force subcommittee identified a number of key issues around the changing landscape of apprenticeship and workforce inclusion. So these items included technological advancement and resulting industry diversification, globalization, structural flexibility, worker migration, education, connection with workforce systems, and transportation. I will focus on just a few of these things for the sake of the presentation, but please let me know if you have any questions about the report. So first, the task force found that apprenticeships should really extend beyond traditional industries, such as plumbing or metalworking, and really expand in industries such as healthcare, information technology, financial services, and civil service. Incorporating apprenticeships into new industries and higher levels of education then allows companies to build and train the highly skilled workforce they need. The task force also noted that the states should consider increased structural flexibility in apprenticeship design. So while apprenticeship should have key skills and qualifications, states may want to consider requirements reflect the principles of universal design, and they can encourage participation in a wider range of people, including individuals with disabilities. This can include everything from flexible schedules to required courses, and the items needed to require for apprenticeships overall. And additionally, I'll mention access to transportation. So transportation is a fundamental barrier to employment and apprenticeships for individuals with disabilities. So if no consistent and reliable mode of transportation is available, individuals with disabilities may find it challenging to commute from an educational institution to the apprenticeship or other work-based learning opportunities. So states should really consider further reducing barriers to transportation for individuals with disabilities, including working with transportation departments, transportation network companies, and other organizations to ensure that other modes of transportation are accessible. Many states are also working with autonomous vehicle companies who could potentially increase transportation opportunities. So for more information on any of those areas of work, please don't hesitate to reach out. We are always happy to talk more with you. So given the increasing number of apprenticeships nationally and the opportunities for growing at the state level, there are new and growing opportunities for individuals with varying skill levels and educational experiences, including individuals with disabilities, to participate in apprenticeships. And as states expand their pool of apprentices, and increase the diversity of workforce, they'll benefit not only from the skills of these employees, but also from a broader range of perspectives on how to confront challenges and achieve success. Next slide. So I know I went rather quickly, but for more information on inclusive workforce practices and to learn more about how states can improve their disability employment policies or practices, we encourage you to reach out and also read the Work Matters framework for states on workforce development for individuals with disabilities, developed by the U.S. Department of Labor State Exchange on Employment and Disability, as well as a CSG and the National Conference of State Legislatures. We're always happy to provide any information, conduct research, or provide any policy and assistance. And we also have a nationally recognized group of policy experts, including Bobby Silverstein, who's one of the original authors of the ADA. One other thing is I want to note that National Apprenticeship Week is taking place November 8th through the 14th. So we encourage all of you to participate and learn. I believe we have included a link on this slide and in the chat. And with that, I will hand it back over to Sydney. So thank you all so much for the opportunity to present. And please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dina, for sharing such an important perspective that oftentimes gets left out in this discussion, but we want to make sure it's at the forefront of everyone's mind when they're thinking about implementing these apprenticeships. So next, we're going to get to hear from state leaders from Ohio and Massachusetts who have worked firsthand with public sector apprenticeships. And so first, we're going to get to hear from the Director of Ohioans with Disabilities, Director Kevin Miller. So Director Miller, thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to have you. If you wouldn't mind, I know Dina touched on it, but would you mind starting off by expanding on the Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities Vocational Apprentice Program? Just a little bit of background on the program, what it's like, and its purpose.
Sure. Thank you, Sydney, and thank you to the Council of State Governments for having this opportunity to talk. I think it's so critical. I think it's reflective of why we have so many people who have decided to join this, because employment and recovery with this pandemic, we like to say we should be right at the front row of this, because any type of economic recovery is going to mean employment, and we need to make sure, at least in Ohio, the 1.7 million Ohioans who identified themselves as having a disability are being included in any type of recovery efforts when it comes to employment. So this apprenticeship program is just part of an overall package that Governor Mike DeWine introduced when he was sworn in a year and a half ago, almost 2 years now. I am a member of the cabinet, which I think is unique within United States state government. I've been a member of the cabinet for over 10 years and thankfully have served now 2 governors in this role. So we are a state agency. We have about 1,200 employees. We serve within the vocational, we serve as the Vocational Rehabilitation program, or the designated state unit within Ohio, but we also have the Division of Disability Determination through the Social Security Administration. So we have roughly 1,200 employees across the state that serve what we call a continuum of services for individuals with disabilities. So when Governor DeWine was sworn in, literally, I think it was, we timed it 3 minutes after he was sworn in, he signed an executive order saying that Ohio would be a disability inclusion state and model employer. So as part of that initiative, we work closely to prepare several initiatives. The Vocational Rehabilitation Apprentice Program within state government is one of those things. I know that one of our previous speakers talked about disability etiquette training. Part of that executive order that Governor DeWine signed mandated that every single state employee, some 53,000 employees, would take disability etiquette training, which we developed. So that's one part of it. Apprenticeship in employment also has to have people who are aware and are knowledgeable about why we're doing this. And I'm sure, as many of the experts who are here will tell you, that sometimes they have to think a little differently when we say, you already have people with disabilities, probably in large numbers. working in your state agency, your private business right now. What we want to talk about is how they bring benefits to the table, and hiring more individuals with disabilities have those benefits that was talked about by Dr. Elliott. And so this vocational apprenticeship program was a presentation that I did to the entire cabinet. So you had the directors of the Department of Transportation, Natural Resources, Public Safety, and we said, every job that you have that is difficult to fill, we want to know what that is. So for instance, at the Department of Transportation, lots of full-time work is snow plowing, working along the state roads, paving, all the way up to IT professionals. You had other positions within the Department of Aging where they needed someone who could do graphic design. So what we said was, give us all of your positions that you post the most. I didn't mean to be a poet there. So what we then did was go through our caseloads of vocational rehabilitation counselors and say, kind of work backwards and reverse engineer and say, tell us what the skill sets are. Maybe they're in college, maybe they're getting a certificate or a higher credential that's been talked about. And then here's the position. So how do we work these things to merge so that we can place individuals? And I think the key thing in this is that we said, through a budget initiative that Governor DeWine put together, we at Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities would pay for an intermittent position of up to 1,500 hours for the year for them to learn and gain those skills with the ultimate goal of permanent employment in state government. So we had just launched this just October of last year. And so when we got to March of this year, we had 2 people who had been employed permanently who had started their apprenticeships, and they didn't even wait until those hours had run out and the agency had decided to hire them. We had about 17 that were getting ready to go through the placement process when COVID hit. So just within the last 60 days, we have begun through our Office of Budget and Management, been given instructions by the governor to say, this is still important. Let's start getting people back into the agencies, even if it's working remotely, and get them the skill sets they need in a variety of positions in a variety of state agencies so that everyone knows we are committed to permanent placement. And what that does is it takes away some fear, because as an agency director myself, usually when someone comes to you and says, we want you to participate in something, the first thing you're thinking about is, what is the cost? How much administration is this going to take? Or our vocational rehabilitation counselors are the ones who are working with private partners and providers for on-the-job training. They're the ones who are going to the workplace. And it takes away some of the fear, and it also allows for a bridging of understanding through the etiquette training of, it might mean that someone needs to have directions be given a little bit differently, but they're also finding that, wow, once it's kind of utilizing and teaching maybe a little bit differently, they're able to get it and they come to work and onboarding costs go down. And so this apprenticeship program is a key jewel in Governor DeWine's initiative to make Ohio an inclusive employer and a model state.
Thank you so much. I've learned so much that I did not know just from the background that I've read online. So I really appreciate that. I did want to ask, you answered a lot of my questions kind of as you were going, but I did want to ask, Ohio is really leading the way in this. And I was curious if you could share a little bit about what advice you would give to other states as they, think about replicating Ohio's model in their own state.
Yeah, thank you, Sydney. I think the most important thing that advice maybe that I would give is that you have to also know, just because it's being done here in Ohio, you have to be committed to the idea of whether you're in Kentucky or Indiana or Montana or wherever, you can conceptually, it's about making sure you want to be committed to doing this. It doesn't have to look exactly the same. We live in a collective bargaining state. So, I know there are some states that don't have that, and they said, hey, let's waive collective bargaining. Whatever it is, I think the commitment needs to be, first of all, I give a ton of kudos, not just because he's my boss, but Governor DeWine has a long history of supporting individuals with disabilities. And so, it was quite an easy sell when I shared these ideas and he said, why wouldn't we do this? So, that was about the easiest sell I could ever do. And what you find is people want to do something like this when you're able to come and answer the questions. If you self-scout ahead of time, I was thinking, okay, if I wasn't a director of a disability agency, but I was the director of, the Department of Corrections, what would I be asking questions about? Is it okay to do this? If I see someone who's blind, can I say it's good to see you? That's where the disability etiquette training comes in, because people innately don't want to offend, but if they're fearful, they're going to rather sit on the sidelines. So what we did was come in and say, we're going to bring you on the field, and we're going to try to address all these things, but also understand we're going to learn all of this together. So the advice I would give in short order is, as long as you say we're going to do this, everything else you can figure out. But it's usually getting over that hump of saying we will do this. Lots of people want to talk about why it won't work. But if you start off by saying we're going to do this, everything else you can work out. It's just a matter of effort.
Great, thank you so much. And I think you bring up a great point too about kind of the interagency collaboration there. You talk about working with Department of Transportation, you talk about, Voc Rehab, you talk about the governor's office. So kind of seeing how it takes a lot of different agencies to collaborate. So I enjoyed hearing that perspective as well. So thank you so much. I was going to ask as well, were there any challenges when you were starting the program and kind of getting it off, and how have you overcome those? Because it seems, even with COVID, you talked about that, which was one of my other questions, how do you overcome COVID? And it sounds like you all are still, trying to move forward and have that commitment, like you were saying. So interested to hear how you've overcome any challenges.
Well, I come at this from being a parent of a young man now with autism. And so when you see and you live the experience of what those difficulties are as a parent, but also as you see individuals with disabilities, whatever that disability is, if again, you go back to the commitment level, it doesn't matter what initiatives anybody's going to talk about in any walk of life. When it comes to policy, you're going to have issues. I tell our staff all the time, whatever is planned will never get implemented exactly the same way. We have to be fluid. We have to be able to change quickly. And so some of the issues that we had developed, first of all, was just the buy-in. I'm sure that's not a shock to anybody. When you're thinking about corrections, you go, oh, well, why would we even have somebody with a disability in corrections? This can be a dangerous place, so forth. Then when you start sitting down and thinking about, well, where you're really having problems hiring and where you have a tremendous amount of turnover is in your commissary, your cafeteria, some of the other groundskeeping work that's done. We're not talking necessarily about being a correctional officer. People sometimes only think of what the stereotype is for within whatever that department is. So even within OOD, most people think immediately of being a master's degree vocational counselor or an adjudicator who does the Social Security claims. But we have a very vast IT department. We have financial departments that have to be run, account clerks, graphic design, communications, publications, because we have to have information that's out. So when we sit down with an agency, the important thing, I think, from the difficulty standpoint was drawing that out. To say, don't be afraid, tell us what these things are. And when they realized that, hey, we could make this kind of difficulty an opportunity, which is how we've looked at what we're doing with this pandemic. We've not allowed COVID to dictate the fight to us. We've said, no, we're going to get up and start swinging and try to make things work for us as part of this. And so we've had we're close to 3,000 placements in jobs just since March. Now, we can't compare that to what we were doing from March to October of last year, because it's not even apples to oranges. But what we've seen is we've been having other states ask us, how do you do this remotely? And again, it's a matter of will. And so those difficulties, you got to go into this being real. You can't go into this and talk to somebody and go, look, we're not going to have any problems. No, you're going to have problems. We're going to have candidates who maybe struggle and maybe this job isn't the right fit. That's okay. Don't give up on the idea of we're going to do as much upfront work as possible to match the skill set with what the skills are needed. It sounds basic, but as we've said culturally, you know, we've moved from the 20th century thinking of hire a person with a disability because it's the nice thing to do. And by the way, I always say it is the nice thing to do. But what we say is in this global economy, you have to be able to have the business want to do this. It can't just be a, you know, well, we'll do this because we want to be good partners and show that we're diverse. They want to do that, but ultimately they're responsible for their shareholders as well. So in state government, we want to be the example, even though we're not a private business, we want to show from a policy standpoint of what inclusiveness is. So be upfront about, you know what, there'll be some difficulties, there'll be some bumps in the road, but we're committed to smooth those things out and make sure we get the right candidate into the jobs that you need.
Great, thank you. That was a great answer and very informative. One last question, I'll let you off the hook.
Yeah.
You talked about a variety of different jobs that you've seen the apprentices go into, and I was interested if there's been one department or one kind of sector that you've seen the most success in, or if it's kind of just been all over the board.
Yeah, you know, I will tell you that it's kind of a two-part thing that I would say. You know, prior to COVID, as being part of the governor's executive workforce board as well, that sets the policies for employment. You know, at any given time, even right now, there's some 50,000 jobs in Ohio, both public and private sector, that are unfilled. And it's because we have people that don't have the right skill sets or they don't know how to gain access into that area. And so awareness of saying, here's these jobs and here is exactly what you need to have to fulfill those jobs is important for you to be able to make that kind of money that you want to make. So we've seen some really good growth when it comes to logistics. We have a lot of placements in logistics because especially right now with COVID, you're seeing a ton of logistical things, whether that be through Amazon or other box manufacturers who are doing all online things. And logistics is very heavy into that. Everything's timed, everything is about how quickly you can fill orders. And so when you think about what are some individuals with disabilities who really do this, I think it was highlighted even in 60 Minutes a couple Sundays ago, where, you know, you're finding businesses who say, you know, we're looking for someone who really doesn't mind doing high complex monotonous things like logistics. And so we have candidates who are working, who we support, who are in colleges, who are getting internships into these businesses, and then hopefully being hired, and they have been hired permanently. So COVID in the world, it's been in the hospitals where they're putting a heavy emphasis on what they need for doctors and nurses, where you got to get PPE into those hospitals. And Ohio has a very robust hospital system. So we're placing a lot of people into hospitals, and we're also placing a lot of people into logistics areas. And then I would probably say third is within the IT world. And we're placing a lot of people that who know coding and can do routine help desk assistance. And so we've had a lot of success in that. So those would be kind of the three sector areas that I would talk about. And within our state governments, we're seeing everything in our assistance to call center work of helping people with Medicaid. One of our full-time employees that was hired from the Department of Aging is a graphic designer who graduated from the Columbus College of Art and Design, had an internship with the Department of Aging, and was hired full-time. So our best way of showing how these are benefits is by letting those other people say, yeah, we did this and this was great.
Great, thank you so much. I've learned so much from you and really appreciate you taking the time to talk about Ohio's initiative. I think it's super innovative, and I think you'll likely see many states follow. So I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Director Wynn from the Mayor's Office in Boston and hear a little bit about what Boston's doing in the area. Director Wynn, I will pass it over to you.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Dr. Miller, for a great insight to how Ohio State works with registered public sector apprenticeships. I want to thank CSG and also the Urban Institute, my colleague presenters, for all their insights and resources to this field. It's definitely an important one worth investing and looking into, so thank you. I'm gonna ask someone to pull up my slides if they can. Great, thank you. Next, I will be talking about, next slide, please. Thank you. For the purpose of this webinar, I really want to tie in Dr. Elliott's work on Urban Institute and also my colleagues, and then working around state, and then how the city and local municipalities can plug into state registered public sector apprenticeship. So in that regard, I will talk about the emergency medical technicians, EMTs, which is directly tied to the public sector. Another track that I will briefly talk about is building pathways, which is a pre-apprenticeship and then apprenticeship program into 15 construction trades, working on commercial and residential real estate projects in and around the Boston area. And then I will also highlight the facilities maintenance technician, which is also tied to city and state buildings for building and green energy maintenance. And then the last one I will touch on, which is the hospitality. And I would argue that that would be the least tied to public sector apprenticeships, but they are tied to city approved commercial development in hotel and tourism within the city of Boston. So in all respects, these apprenticeship programs will be tied to whether it's procurement and or state or city owned jurisdictions over the jobs. All of these programs that I will discuss are state registered apprenticeships that meet the high quality standards of apprenticeships in the state of Massachusetts. And a lot of these components are similar to the 5 components that the Urban Institute alluded to and was discussed by Dr. Elliott earlier. Next slide. So I just wanted to talk very briefly about the future. Why is registered apprenticeship so important? And so I think a lot of you know that the labor needs on a national context is that just in 1996, 11.9% of the labor force was over 55, and that has increased to 22% by 2016 and projected to be 24.8% by 2026. And so we know that a third of all employees of government agencies in the US were over 55 and will lead, and while they have wisdom and a lot of expertise, there is a prediction that the retirement rate will be higher over time. And then in 2015, 54% of state and local governments reported increase in retirement rates of previous years. And then projected in the next 10 years nationally, the biggest industry, which is 37% of water, utilities, and particular in the public sector, will have a high retirement rate. We see this in comparable cities to Boston, such as Seattle, San Francisco, and Portland, Oregon as well. So while you see a lot of the national trend of rate of retirement, you see that playing down to the local level as well. Next. And, this is not to say that people should retire or the workforce should be aging out per se. This is just used as a planning tool to predict the job and talent need in the future. And so in Boston alone, the city of Boston is one of the largest employers in the city. And we know and understand that we have to develop a talent pipeline for the city. We pulled up data from our HR department and various city agencies, and we aggregated it. And in 2017, about 12% of employees have service 30 plus years of service. And we use the 30 plus year as an indicator of when that person will retire over time. By 2022, you'll see that number increase to 23%, and in 2027, that projection is predicted to increase by 35% in terms of retirement rate. Now, this is just an aggregate number in a snapshot. If we were to pull into different industries within the public sector, you'll see that these retirement trends will vary. Some of them are much higher than others. Next slide. And so given the fact that the city, which is part of a large public sector in the state of Massachusetts, we know that we have to develop a talent pipeline from the employer perspective. We also don't want to wait until the last minute to scramble and look for talent, because we know that good talent needs to be nurtured, fostered, developed, and then invested over time, which is why we really, the Mayor Walsh and the administration made a huge investment in state registered apprenticeship in the city of Boston. And so our vision, we know that this is a triple win for the city. We know that it provides Boston residents a chance to enter into city positions with low barriers to entry, with offering good wages, health benefits, pension, and upward mobility. So it's good for the residents and for the community. It gives trainees continued opportunities for professional development that will help them move up the career ladder using tuition-free community college that we have here at the city, dual enrollment, and articulation agreements. So it's kind of using the current ecosystem of the educational assets of the city and tying it all into the apprenticeship model that we're seeing here. We also want to increase employee diversity by targeting recruitment from key neighborhoods. And so we know that Boston, like many urban cities around the country, is changing in a good way. It's reflective of the diversity and the community. And we want to make sure that the city's workforce reflects those values. And so we have a heavy recruitment with people of color, women, and bilingual residents, as it is a big plus to the talent pool. And it also provides city agencies with qualified candidates to fill in-demand positions by helping to create a skilled talent pool that matches the hiring needs. And so it really, develops the talent and then also meets the demand of employers as well. And we know that graduates will be pre-screened, pre-trained, and qualified to meet the specifications of agency leadership for positions where broader candidate pool is needed. So it's really a good win for all areas of the city. Next slide. And so how did we do the design process? So forgive me if my presentation goes into too much of the nuts and bolts of what's the architectural design of a state registered apprenticeship program. And so we did a deep dive by collaborating with department heads and the human resources team members to examine specific job openings across departments and to identify requirements and technical skills needed. And so we looked at collective bargaining agreements. We studied and looked at civil service agreements. We looked at how various city agencies were hiring, because we wanted to respect the current hiring process and at the same time figure out where the gap is and where to fill it. We wanted to understand employer expectations, even though our agency is an employer agency of the city of Boston. We wanted to really work with our colleagues to say, hey, we get it. We don't want to throw you folks who are untrained just because you need to meet a certain baseline data. But we really wanted to hear what employers' expectations are in terms of job readiness, professionalism, licensing, and certification. So we want to make sure that we are meeting the employer demand and then designing an apprenticeship pipeline that meets that for employers. We recognize challenges and opportunities to navigate job placements in civil service positions and those subject to collective bargaining agreements. So again, there were certain departments that had different timing and slots and negotiations and period of timeframes in which collective bargaining ends and begins and ends. And so understanding those loopholes are very important, and identify career ladder opportunities, including the potential for linking training and jobs to post-secondary education. As Dr. Elliott alluded to earlier, it's not just a job, it is a continuation and journey of that student who's in the registered apprenticeship program. Next slide. And so this just gives you a snapshot of our emergency medical technician training view, bird's eye view. And, we knew that the EMS department, who's in the healthcare sector, which is one of the largest employer of the city, needed diverse, talented candidates. We knew that, and we knew they had a hiring challenge. And so we created a registered pre-apprenticeship pipeline with them and then into an apprenticeship so that they can get the candidates they need. And they were Boston residents and diverse and bilingual at the same time. And so here it's just a snapshot of the timeline. We had to do pre-screening, we had a bridge course, we had a basic EMT course. We had state certification that you couldn't, bypass. You had to really figure out a way to provide support so graduates can take the exam and pass. And then we created a pipeline right into the EMT Recruit Academy, which already existed, and then moving over to promotion to EMTs. Next slide. So, you see the continuum in a sample journey of our registered apprenticeship program, but some of the most notable EMT apprenticeship components that I wanted to spend some time to talk about, because I think that they are key nuts and bolts to advancing entry-level workers. And so, for example, Boston EMS, Office of Workforce Development, and the Bunker Hill Community College currently partnered on an initiative to upskill current City of Boston EMT through a paramedic training. And so for those who are already certified as EMTs, they need to complete a paramedic study certificate and pass a licensing exam. We provide that support. We pay for that fee so that current EMTs can get this certification, pass the licensing exam, and move up the ladder if they choose to. And if desired, the current EMTs from our registered apprenticeship program will be able to complete an associate degree in paramedic studies. The Boston EMS department, which is part of the city, our office and UMass Boston are also developing a path to a bachelor's degree to further develop the diversity of leadership in Boston EMS industry. And so you can see that, you know, once you get into apprenticeship program, we wanted to do more and provided upward mobility options for graduates and participants in the EMT apprenticeship program so that they can have choices to either move up from their current employer or move out and up. And so those were the kind of nitty-gritty nuts and bolt framework in which we built. Next slide, please. And so just briefly, how did we outreach and did recruitment? We did an immense outreach going specifically into neighborhoods, schools, working with Boston's partners, and for you know, 2 cycles, which have about 12 to 25 slots. We had 1,000 residents and individual applying for the program. And so we knew that we were doing the right thing by getting people to learn more about good options for them in terms of career track. We knew that we wanted to get residents who were low moderate to moderate income families. We knew we had to go into neighborhoods that had high unemployment rate. We knew we had to really make sure that the opportunities in which we're providing is equitable. So everybody rolled up their sleeves, went into the communities and recruit. And so we were very happy with our results and people who were applying. And I'll talk briefly later that the majority of our graduates from all of our registered apprenticeship program are women, people of color, and those who are immigrants and bilingual, which is the kind of results that we wanted. Next slide. I'm not going to go into too much of building pathways, which is in the construction trades with 15 constructions in the New England region. But this is a pre-apprenticeship into an apprenticeship program for building pathways. It's been around for about 5.5 to 6 years. And you know, what I love about the construction trades is that they already had an infrastructure and model that they've been working for decades. And so, but they were struggling with diversifying workers in the construction field. They were also fearing that the construction workers will be aging. And so you really need to pay attention to that and build the pipeline today for the workers of the future. So you can't really scramble a 2-week boot camp. And that's not to disrespect 2-week boot camps. It's just to say that these technical trades and these licensure take time. And as all of us know, and everybody on the panel and everybody is listening in, we all know that we got to where we are, not because of a 2-week boot camp. We know that we always have to focus on our career and think about it intentionally. And so that's why registered apprenticeships in the various pathways, it's very intentional and thought, investing in heavy thought process and planning. And so we do have results around this. And this, I want to reiterate that it is not necessarily tied directly to the public sector apprenticeship program in terms of construction, but it does indirectly tie into development projects that have been approved by the city of Boston to do real estate development, both commercially and residentially in the city of Boston. So those that are working in Boston to do all these great high rises, they still need to hire a diverse graduate or talent pool. So you can't just put the same people on the same jobs. We have requirements from Article 80 in the city of Boston to have diverse participants. Next slide, please. And then another apprenticeship program we do have is a facilities maintenance technician. We know that, you know, it's not maybe sexy for apprenticeship, as sexy as IT and healthcare, But I think that there is a growing need for energy efficient buildings and for climate action steps that cities, municipalities, and also states are taking on. And so we know that things can't work like the way they used to, and that you need certain certifications in the green movement to obtain so that you can keep your job, but not only that, are able to move up the career ladder. So the facilities maintenance technician is not necessarily, again, directly tied to the public sector jobs, but indirectly they do hire subcontractors of companies that have contracts with city and state buildings. So school buildings, community centers, public housing authority houses, you name it. If you look around all the cities, municipalities have buildings and properties, and they need good workers to maintain a green building. And so that's why we chose to invest in it. And make no mistake, look, green maintenance technician is not sexy, but there are credits that lead to construct an associate degree in construction management at Roxbury Community College or Wentworth Technology, so that you can transfer what you learned in this apprenticeship program into post-secondary education. Last but not least, again, people don't like to say, well, we don't want to focus on hospitality and housekeeping apprenticeship. It's not sexy. It's a dead-end job. Well, you know what? I'm sorry to say, but that's where our immigrant community is. And so, and people, and those jobs are here to stay. And so we had to strategize and work with the hotels and say, look, let's say that we need to make these good jobs, and we need to make jobs that are in the hospitality industry that has already stigma a way out. And so that's why we invested in a registered apprenticeship program in hospitality and housekeeping. Look, I came here as an immigrant and a refugee from Vietnam, probably 32 years ago now. My parents have worked to clean bathrooms and in hotels for the last 32 years before my dad retired. It's what they loved doing. It's what they go into work every single day. And so it's okay. My parents raised a great family. Unfortunately, these were not good jobs for them at that time, but that's what they were used to. And so going back to that, we wanted to make sure that these were good jobs and jobs that had career mobility, either upward or out. And so this is a registered state apprenticeship program that is tied to union hotels, which 53% of hotels in Boston are union, and they have labor management collective bargaining with Local 26. And so what we wanted to do was create an apprenticeship program into Local 26 that provided them with health benefits, upward mobility, increase in wages, worker protection, also a $10,000 down payment on a home. And so we saw those benefits as great for workers in the hospitality. So we decided to negotiate with Local 26 and say, can you give us those slots if we pre-train and screen Boston residents for these jobs in the hotels that, by the way, the city had approved to build. And so again, while that doesn't directly tie to public sector apprenticeship, you can see how municipalities, the city, the state, counties can look at their buying power to be creative about public sector apprenticeships. Next slide, please. At the end of the day, everybody's saying, come on, where are the training and placements? What's going on here? And we have them. And I just want to throw these numbers out, but I do want to caution to say that these are numbers in which we only record as it relates to our Greater Boston Apprenticeship Initiative. These agencies have many more apprenticeship graduates than these that are reflected in these numbers. So currently for the registered apprenticeship program that they're partnering with us, it's a new program. And we're at a point where we do have a proof of concept. So that's a good thing for the emergency medical technician. And that proof of concept will say, hey, we did it with the EMTs. We can do it in the IT sector. We can do it in other sectors and be creative as well, and use the city and state as employers. For building pathways, since that's been around for quite some time for the construction, the trades have had many pipelines to increase diversity in their workforce. But for building pathways, they've accepted and have 270 Boston residents who are people of color and women in all their 15 trades. And one lesson to learn about the construction is that we assumed that people of color were going into the labor, and not that there's anything wrong with laborers and painters, but most of the graduates from building pathways chose technical fields such as electricians, roofing, elevator, sheet metal. And then some of them had an opportunity to move up to management to do project management in construction as well. And they were tied to Wentworth technology. So your first year of apprenticeship program in building pathways in the trades, you already receive 50% of your credit towards construction management at Wentworth. And so again, post-secondary education credentials is a key to providing good choices. Facilities maintenance technician, that's a pilot one that we did. And that's about 16 to 20 Boston residents, and that's new. And it's still proof concept, so we're not there yet. And hospitality and hotel obviously has one of the largest too, which is 300. And of course, I just want to reiterate that these aren't the numbers that these program managers have only. These numbers only reflect what they need to report to our office. So clearly they have higher numbers than that. Next slide. Look, you already know from Dr. Elliott and all of my colleagues that this benefits, this is a win. This is not a handout. And Director Miller talked about this too. This is about providing and coming to the table with something and talent for the city as an employer. We're helping the city, train for a talent pipeline and not waiting for, a week or 2 weeks before there is an emergency to hire. So it really helps meet the workforce needs of city agencies by providing a diverse pool of well-trained Boston residents. And it gives Boston residents access the options for entering family-sustaining careers. And we want to make sure all these opportunities are equitable. And that is important. And it's not only for selected few because you had cousins or you knew someone in the system. That's not what we want here. And it provides upward mobility, and it's in line with Mayor Walsh's vision for diversity and inclusion. Look, these investments in job training and apprenticeships provide economic returns for all the financial investments. For every job, 10 job placements, we did an estimate, 3 to 4 additional jobs will be created. And then there will be an increase to 1.2 to 1.9 million in economic activity when you're investing in these apprenticeship programs. And as a reminder, when you're investing in Boston residents, you know what? They contribute to the local economy. They buy, they buy here. They are civically active. They're ingrained in the ecosystem. So and they're contributing to your tax base, and they're getting off of public assistance, they're owning their own homes, all the great things that America has to offer. So apprenticeship really apprenticeship models really bear that fruit for us. Next slide. Listen, this is not kind of like this whole process does not come with complaints and lessons. And, you know, there are many, many days when I wish I was like, why did I go down this road? And so we know that the apprenticeship model works. And I'm so happy that Urban Institute and Dr. Elliott and her team have really put emphasis on public sector apprenticeship because it works. We know that it has a good return. We've already proved it. We have proof of concepts. The challenge that we have in the city of Boston with our public sector apprenticeships is that, you know, we need to go to scale. A lot of these, apprenticeship training slots are, 12 to 25 per cycle. Depending on higher needs, it's either one cycle or 2 cycle a year. And so when you're talking about hundreds of thousands of residents who are unemployed or underemployed, and you're talking about a post-pandemic economic recovery, you need to go to scale. You really need to have a massive investment in something like this. Other lessons to learn is that, look, everybody thinks, this is kind of like, you hop onto a press conference and then, 6 months later, you're going to say, I need the results of this. This thing, training and tracks are a journey, just like all of us here in the panel. Our career is a journey. And so job development in between training is important for participants because they also need family sustaining income while they're taking care of their families and where they're working and they're studying at the same time to improve their careers. And so I think that was our biggest challenge. And then the other piece too is employer commitment in hiring. You really need a commitment from employers to say, you know what, our EMS department, we have 12 coming out of the pipeline, 12 is graduating, 12 are licensed. You need to hire all 12, and then we have another 12 for you. So, and luckily our EMS department is with the city. That's our brothers and sisters. And I pick up the phone and I say, look, Chief Hooley, we have folks who are graduating. And he said, great, we're ready to hire. We need people. And so they also hire from the public and from their own pipelines, but they've also made a commitment to hire diverse constituents from the community as well. For our finance and our budget for apprenticeship programs, we can always make a good case for ROIs, as I talked about earlier. But at the end of the day, people still need training dollars for apprenticeship training. And we were lucky enough to use developer fees from a linkage law from all these development projects. And we took those developer fees that was rerouted to workforce development, and then we paid training for the apprenticeship graduates. So we paid for their books, their fees, their licensing exams, if they got a problem with their driver's license, we paid for that. We got coaches, career coaches, we paid for their tuition, their associate degree, and if they decide to go to get a bachelor's degree, we will see if we can pay a significant portion of that, because we can't have you being working and graduating with huge student debt. And so this is just kind of like a snapshot. I hope I did some justice to my colleagues' presentations and all the great work that they have been doing. And so a lot of the next slide is just says thank you. So just hopefully, my thoughts have provided some seeds and give you examples of some of the diversity of pipelines for public sector and how you should be innovative thinking about designing and developing it. So a lot of our work is on our website. Happy to answer questions. And I thank you for listening and for sharing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Wynn. It was so interesting to hear about all the great work that Boston is doing and how you've been able to recruit, from a diverse pool. And so that was great to hear, and super thankful for you sharing today. So I really appreciate it. And now we're going to quickly jump into some breakout rooms. And so I think we'll have about 10 minutes in our breakout rooms where we'll be able to just have kind of more open dialogue and discuss within small groups. Since we're not able to convene in person and we'll be able to have small group discussions there, we're going to try this out and see if that works so that we can really have those discussions. So I'm going to ask you all to just be patient for one moment while our communications team divides us out into breakout rooms, and we will all talk soon. And that will last 10 minutes, and then we'll come back together for closing comments and wrapping up. So thank you all so much, and we will join breakout rooms here shortly. All right, I think people are starting to trickle back in from the breakout room, so I will give just 1 second, and then we will wrap up this meeting. It's been so much great content and great presentations from our speakers. And so I know in my breakout room, everyone was very interested and had learned a lot. So I really appreciate everyone who's contributed today. The first thing I want to do before we just kind of close out with our contact information is ask if the speakers have any last closing comments that they want to share before we wrap up. I know we've got a couple minutes left here. So if so, feel free to unmute and say a last comment. All right, and if not, something that we spoke about in our breakout room was, if you're interested, if you're on here today and thinking this sounds great, how do I get this started in my state? If you want to reach out to Dina or I or our partners at Urban, I know we work very closely. We would love to kind of talk with you. How do you take those first steps in your state? And we can connect you closer with other state officials who've made it work in their state, and really think through, who do you need to talk to? How do you get this on the agenda to start in your state? So we would be more than happy to work with you, and please feel free to contact us at any of our emails up here on the board. Did we have anyone raising their hand in the chat? I cannot see. If so, feel free to unmute yourself. All right. Seeing that we don't have anyone raising their hand, I just want to say thank you so much to our amazing speakers for your time and presentations on this important issue. And thank you to everyone who attended and participated today as well. We would love for you to attend our other virtual CSG National Conference event. And if you're interested, find any of our sessions on our website. We'll be having sessions through the mid-December time, right before the holidays. And additionally, if you are interested in hearing more about our disability work, we have a listserv that we would love to have you join. And we have an upcoming session tomorrow afternoon as well about the effects of COVID-19 on transition-age youth as they prepare for employment beyond high school. So we ask that you take a moment to fill out the survey following the webinar, and really appreciate everyone joining us today. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great afternoon, and I look forward to hopefully working with you all in the future.